Venice, 1933. The golden Serafina glides through moonlit canals, its gilded hull shimmering like a phantom. Aboard, laughter fades to silence. In the grand cabin, Victor Langston lies dead, a silk scarf knotted cruelly around his throat. The air hums with secrets, candlelight flickers on faces pale with shock or guilt. Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian detective with the magnificent mustache, surveys the scene. His gray cells stir. Who among these elegant passengers, heiress, lord, doctor, or diva, wielded the scarf, and why? A single clue, a glint of gold, promises to unravel the truth. Chapter 1. The Gilded Voyage. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with his immaculate mustache and piercing gray eyes, stood on the deck, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. He had accepted an invitation from his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, to join this exclusive voyage. "A holiday, mon ami," Hastings had insisted, his earnest face alight with enthusiasm. "A week of Venetian splendor, good company, and no mysteries to trouble your little gray cells." Poirot had smiled, his mustache twitching, for he knew mysteries had a way of finding him like moths to a flame. The golden Serafina was no ordinary vessel. Its cabins, adorned with silk tapestries and gold-leafed mirrors, housed a select company of passengers, each a figure of note in their own sphere. Victor Langston, the host, was a man of 50, broad-shouldered and commanding, with a voice that boomed like a factory whistle. His wealth, built on steel and railways, was matched only by his ambition to conquer new horizons, social, financial, and some whispered romantic. At his side, radiant as a Renaissance Madonna, was Elena Moretti, his fiancée, a young Italian heiress whose dark eyes and delicate features belied a steely resolve. Her diamond engagement ring, a ostentatious gem, sparkled with every gesture, drawing envious glances. Among the guests was Lord Reginald Ashbourne, a British aristocrat whose lean frame and hawkish features suggested a predator cloaked in civility. His family's fortunes had dwindled, and his rivalry with Langston was no secret. A debt of $50,000, unpaid and festering, hung between them like a storm cloud. Dr. Klaus Werner, a German physician with a rigid posture and pale, intense eyes, kept to himself, his resentment of Langston's influence over his medical research palpable. And then there was Madame Céleste Dubois, a French opera singer whose auburn hair and sultry voice captivated the company. Yet her smiles, Poirot noted, were tinged with melancholy, as if she carried a wound no aria could heal. The evening began with a banquet in the grand salon, where candlelight flickered on silver cutlery and the air hummed with the clink of champagne flutes. Langston stood, glass raised, his presence filling the room. "To Venice," he declared, his voice rich with confidence. "To beauty, to wealth, and to love." Elena smiled, demurely, but Poirot's keen eyes caught the flicker of unease in her gaze. Ashbourne's lips tightened, his brandy untouched. Werner stared into his plate while Celeste's laugh, bright and brittle, cut through the toast like a shard of glass. Poirot sipped his tisane, observing the interplay of glances, the subtle shifts in posture. "The human heart, Hastings," he murmured, leaning toward his friend. "It is a canvas of secrets. Observe how they watch one another. Each smile hides a motive." Hastings, ever the optimist, chuckled. "You see mysteries in a dinner party, Poirot. These are merely rich folk enjoying a holiday." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Rich folk, mon ami, are never merely anything." As the night deepened, the golden Serafina glided through Venice's quieter canals, the lapping water a soft counterpoint to the string quartet playing Vivaldi. Poirot strolled the deck, his cane tapping lightly, his mind cataloging details. The way Elena's fingers twisted her napkin, the faint tremor in Ashbourne's hand as he lit a cigarette. the lingering glance Celeste cast toward Langston. Dr. Werner, retiring early, muttered about a crewman's injury, his medical bag clutched tightly. It was nearing midnight when a scream shattered the serenity. The music faltered, glasses stilled, and the passengers turned as one. The sound came from the grand cabin, Langston's private suite. Hastings, ever gallant, sprang to his feet, Poirot following with measured steps. The door was locked, but a crewman produced a key and the scene within froze the blood. Victor Langston lay sprawled across a Persian rug, his face ashen, his eyes wide in a final, futile plea. Around his throat, knotted with cruel precision, was a silk scarf, ivory embroidered with roses, unmistakably Elena's, a gift she had displayed proudly at dinner. The cabin was undisturbed, no signs of struggle, the windows latched, the door locked from within. A single candle burned low, its wax pooling on a side table. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the scarf. Strangulation, he said softly, yet no marks of resistance. He knew his killer, Hastings. Trusted them. His eyes swept the room, pausing on a glint beneath the table, a cigarette case, silver, monogrammed with VL in elegant script. He did not touch it, but his gaze lingered, as if the object whispered secrets only he could hear. The passengers gathered at the door, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and, Poirot noted, calculation. Elena clutched her shawl, her lips trembling. "Victor," she whispered, tears spilling. Ashbourne's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the scarf. Werner's hands clenched, his medical bag still at his side. Celeste, pale as moonlight, swayed, her hand gripping a chair for support. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low. "This is no accident. The scarf, it is the key, but not the whole story. Observe the details, the locked door, the absence of struggle, the perfume that lingers." He inhaled subtly, detecting a faint floral note, heavy and distinctive, clinging to the scarf. "We must question them all, but carefully. The truth hides in what they do not say." Hastings nodded, his face grim. "Murder on a canal boat, Poirot. How could it happen under our noses?" Poirot's mustache curved in a faint smile. "The gray cells, Hastings. They will find the answer. But first we must listen to the lies." The crew secured the cabin, and Poirot began his inquiries. Elena, seated in the salon, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, monogrammed, Poirot noted, with E.M. in the same elegant script as the cigarette case. "Victor was my world," she said, her Italian accent soft but steady. "We were to marry in Rome next month. Who could do this?" Her grief seemed genuine, yet Poirot's eyes narrowed at her composure, the careful arrangement of her words. "The scarf, mademoiselle," he said gently. "It is yours, non?" She nodded. "A gift from Victor. I wore it at dinner, but I lent it to Madame Dubois afterward. She admired it." Poirot's head tilted, his mind filing the detail. "And where were you when the scream was heard?" Elena hesitated, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "In my cabin, alone. I heard the scream and ran to the salon." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. We will speak again." Ashbourne was next, his posture rigid on the deck. "Langston was a scoundrel," he said bluntly, his aristocratic drawl laced with venom. "He owed me 50,000, ruined my investments with his schemes." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet you dined with him, monsieur?" Ashbourne's lips thinned. "Business, not pleasure. I was in my cabin when he died." Poirot noted the polished sheen of Ashbourne's shoes untouched by the damp deck. "Curious," he murmured, "for a man who claims to have stayed indoors." Dr. Werner, questioned in the dining room, was curt. "Langston funded my research," he admitted, his German accent clipped. "But he treated me like a servant." I was treating a crewman's sprain when it happened. His medical bag, Poirot observed, contained a vial of sedative, half empty. A doctor, Poirot said softly, knows how to kill without a trace, non? Werner's eyes flashed. I save lives, not take them. Celeste Dubois, last to be questioned, met Poirot in the lounge, her auburn hair catching the lamplight. Victor was my past, she said, her voice low, husky with emotion. He broke my heart years ago. I moved on. The scent of her perfume, floral, heavy, matched the scarf's lingering fragrance. You borrowed Mademoiselle Moretti's scarf? Poirot asked. She nodded. I returned it before dinner. Her smile was tight, her eyes guarded. As Poirot dismissed her, a deckhand approached, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, I saw something. Before the scream. Mademoiselle Moretti was near the grand cabin, alone, looking nervous. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but before he could respond, a faint sound carried from the canal. A soft splash, as if something had fallen into the water. He turned, his gaze piercing the darkness, the scent of perfume still lingering in his mind. Chapter 2. The heiress's tears. Elena sat poised, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her olive skin pale in the flickering light. She wore a black satin dress, mourning attire donned with theatrical swiftness, and her fingers clutched a handkerchief embroidered with E.M. in delicate script. Her eyes, large and luminous, glistened with tears. Yet Poirot's keen gaze noted their careful precision, as if each tear were measured for effect. Victor was my world, she said, her Italian accent soft, lilting like a gondolier's song. We were to build a life together, Rome, Paris, a family. Who could do this to him? Her voice broke, but her posture remained regal, her hands steady save for the faint twist of the handkerchief. Poirot leaned forward, his small frame immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache a perfect crescent above his lips. Mademoiselle Moretti, he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. The heart grieves, but the mind observes. The scarf, your scarf, was the instrument of death. Tell me, how did it come to be in the grand cabin? Elena's lips parted, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. It was a gift from Victor, she said. He gave it to me in Florence, a token of his love. I wore it at dinner, but Madame Dubois admired it so. I lent it to her afterward before I retired to my cabin. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by a window, turned with a frown. Good heavens, Poirot, she's heartbroken. Surely you don't suspect her. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his head tilting slightly. Mon ami, grief can be a mask, and the truth hides in the folds of such masks. Observe the handkerchief, Hastings. Its monogram, so like the cigarette case found near the body. A coincidence, perhaps? He paused, letting the words hang like the chandelier's prisms catching light. Mademoiselle, where were you precisely when the scream was heard? Elena's fingers tightened on the handkerchief, the silk crumpling. In my cabin, she said, her voice steady but her eyes darting to the side. I was reading Dante to soothe my nerves. The scream startled me and I ran to the salon where I found the others. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, but his mind catalogued the pause, the glance, the too perfect recitation. And the scarf, mademoiselle. When did you last see it? Before dinner, she replied quickly. Celeste returned it, I think, but I left it in the lounge. Anyone could have taken it. Her voice wavered and she dabbed her eyes, the handkerchief fluttering like a white flag. Poirot's gaze lingered on the monogram, its elegant script an echo of the cigarette case's VL, a detail too precise to ignore. The salon door creaked and a deckhand entered, his cap twisted nervously in his hands. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his Venetian accent thick, I must speak. Before the scream, I saw Mademoiselle Moretti near the grand cabin. She looked troubled, pacing alone. Elena's head snapped up, her tears vanishing. "That's absurd!" she cried. "I was in my cabin." The deckhand shrank back, but Poirot raised a hand, his eyes never leaving Elena. "Merci, signor. Your observation is noted." Poirot rose, his cane tapping softly as he paced the salon, his gray cells humming. "The scarf, the cigarette case, the locked door," he murmured almost to himself. "Each a piece of the puzzle, yet the picture remains obscured." He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling notes with a furrowed brow. "Hastings, what do we know of Mademoiselle Moretti's connection to Langston? Her inheritance, perhaps, is a motive?" Hastings glanced at Elena, who had retreated to a corner, her face half hidden by shadow. "She's set to inherit millions," he said quietly. "Langston's will names her as the primary beneficiary, factories, estates, the lot. But Poirot, she loved him. You saw her tears." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Love, mon ami, is a fire that can warm or burn. We must learn more of this love." The investigation shifted to the deck, where the night air was cool, the canal's surface a mirror of stars. Poirot questioned the crew, their faces taut with unease. A steward revealed Langston's reputation. A man of charm but ruthless ambition, whose wealth came at the cost of others' ruin. "He had enemies," the steward whispered, glancing toward the salon where the passengers waited. "Lord Ashbourne lost a fortune to him. Dr. Werner cursed his name, even Madame Dubois. There were rumors of a past affair." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind weaving threads of motive. He returned to the salon where Elena sat alone, her handkerchief now a crumpled ball. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "tell me of Victor Langston. What kind of man was he?" Elena's gaze softened, her voice low. "He was a titan, brilliant, commanding. He promised me the world, but he demanded loyalty in return. Sometimes," she hesitated, her fingers tracing the handkerchief's monogram. "Sometimes he was distant, as if his heart belonged elsewhere." Poirot nodded, filing the admission away. He recalled the perfume on the scarf, floral, heavy, unmistakably Celeste's. Yet Elena's story of lending it raised questions. Had Celeste kept it longer than claimed? Or had someone else taken it, planting it to incriminate? The cigarette case, too, gnawed at him. Its VL monogram suggested Langston, but its style matched Elena's handkerchief too closely. A gift, perhaps, but from whom to whom? As Poirot pondered, Hastings approached, his face flushed with discovery. "Poirot, I've spoken to the purser. Langston was seen arguing with someone on the deck before dinner, a heated row, though the purser couldn't see who. And there's more. A passenger claims to have heard Langston mention disinheriting someone. Could it be Elena?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. "Disinheritance, mon ami, is a motive as old as time. But we must tread carefully. The killer is clever, leaving clues to mislead." He paused, his gaze drifting to the canal, where the earlier splash still lingered in his thoughts. "The deckhand's sighting of Mademoiselle Moretti is troubling, yet it may be a red herring. We must verify her alibi." The night grew deeper, the Golden Seraphina a gilded cage of secrets. Poirot questioned the other passengers briefly, each encounter sharpening his understanding. Lord Ashbourne, when asked about the argument, admitted to a business discussion with Langston but denied violence. "He owed me everything," Ashbourne said, his voice cold. Dr. Werner, still clutching his medical bag, insisted he was with the injured crewman, though his eyes avoided Poirot's. Celeste, her perfume a potent reminder, claimed ignorance of the scarf's fate after returning it, her smile tight with unspoken pain. Poirot returned to the salon where Elena remained, her composure fraying. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, rising, "you think me guilty, don't you? I loved Victor, but he was not perfect. He had secrets, letters, meetings in secret. I saw him with Celeste last week, whispering in the gardens. Her voice cracked, a raw edge of betrayal surfacing. Poirot's head tilted, his gray cells sparking. Letters, mademoiselle? You saw them? She nodded, her eyes flashing. In his cabin, hidden in a drawer. I didn't read them, but they were in a woman's hand. Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a sign of his mind at work. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. As Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the deck, the canal's stillness was broken by a faint cry. A gull, perhaps, or something more sinister. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the water. Hastings, he said softly. The scarf, the cigarette case, the letters. They form a pattern, but it is incomplete. Someone aboard this boat weaves a web of deception, and we must untangle it before they strike again. Chapter 3. The rival's debt. Poirot's companion, Captain Arthur Hastings, paced beside him, his honest face creased with worry. It's a grim business, Poirot, he said, his voice low. Langston dead, and that scarf, Elena's scarf, around his throat. Do you really think she could have done it? Poirot's head tilted, his eyes gleaming like polished agates. Mon ami, the heart is a labyrinth, and motives hide in its twists. Mademoiselle Moretti's tears are poignant, but we must turn our attention to another. Lord Reginald Ashbourne. A man with a debt is a man with a reason to kill. The deck was quiet, save for the soft creak of the boat and the lapping of the canal. Poirot had requested Ashbourne meet him here, away from the claustrophobic elegance of the salon, where candlelight and whispers could obscure the truth. The grand salon, with its mahogany panels and velvet drapes, had been a stage for Langston's charisma. But the deck offered clarity, a place where Poirot's gray cells could work unencumbered. As they waited, Hastings glanced at the water, his mind replaying the deckhand's troubling report. Elena Moretti seen near Langston's cabin before the scream. What about that shadow you saw, Poirot? He asked. On the bank watching us, could it be connected? Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Perhaps, Hastings, perhaps. But first we must unravel the threads before us. Lord Ashbourne's debt to Langston, 50,000. A sum to ruin a man of his station. Such a debt is a chain, and chains can drive men to desperate acts. Lord Reginald Ashbourne appeared at the far end of the deck, his lean figure silhouetted against the lantern's glow. He was a man of 40 with the sharp features of a hawk and the bearing of an aristocrat whose title outshone his fortune. His gray suit was impeccably tailored, but Poirot noted the faint wear at the cuffs, a silent testament to his dwindling wealth. His eyes, cold and calculating, met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice a clipped drawl. I presume you wish to interrogate me about Langston's unfortunate end. I assure you I had no part in it. Poirot gestured to a wicker chair, his manner courteous but unyielding. Monsieur, sit, if you please. Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth, and the truth, it is like a fine wine. It reveals itself with time. Ashbourne sat, his posture rigid, his hands clasped tightly. Poirot noted the polished sheen of his shoes, untouched by the damp deck, a detail that jarred with Ashbourne's claim of remaining in his cabin all evening. You owed Monsieur Langston a considerable sum, Poirot began, his voice soft but piercing. 50,000, no? A debt unpaid, a wound to your pride. Ashbourne's jaw tightened, his lips thinning to a line. Langston was a scoundrel, he said, his tone laced with venom. He lured me into investments, railways, steel, promising fortunes only to pull the rug from under me. He ruined my family's name, left me scrabbling to maintain appearances. But murder? I am a gentleman, not a brute. His words were sharp, but Poirot's eyes caught the tremor in his hand, the way his fingers brushed a cigarette case in his pocket. A case, Poirot noted, that did not bear the VL monogram of the one found near Langston's body. "Yet, monsieur," Poirot said, leaning forward, "you were seen arguing with Langston before dinner." "A heated exchange," the purser said. "What was the nature of this discussion?" Ashbourne's eyes narrowed, his composure fraying. "Business," he said curtly. "I pressed him to settle the debt to show some honor. He laughed, mocked me as always. I left him on the deck and retired to my cabin." Poirot's head tilted, his gaze unwavering. "Curious, monsieur, that your shoes are so pristine. The deck, it is damp with evening mist, yet you claim to have stayed indoors? How do you explain this?" Ashbourne's face paled, his fingers tightening on the chair's arm. I polished them before coming here," he stammered. "A habit, nothing more." Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the lie. Hastings, standing by the railing, interjected, his voice earnest. "Poirot? The man's clearly shaken. Perhaps he's telling the truth?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The truth, mon ami, is a mosaic, and each lie is a cracked tile. We must examine the pattern." He turned back to Ashbourne. "Tell me, monsieur, did you see the scarf, the silk scarf of Mademoiselle Moretti, after dinner?" Ashbourne frowned, his brow furrowing. "I saw it in the lounge, draped over a chair. I thought nothing of it. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. The scarf, with its lingering perfume of Celeste Dubois, was a thread that connected the suspects, but Ashbourne's debt loomed larger, a motive as heavy as the gold on the Golden Serafina's hull. Poirot excused Ashbourne, who retreated with a stiff nod, his eyes darting to the canal as if seeking escape. The detective turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Observe, Hastings, the man's pride is his weakness. A debt of 50,000 is not merely money. It is a wound to his honor, a spur to violence. But we must verify his alibi." They moved to Ashbourne's cabin, a small but elegant space with a single porthole overlooking the water. Poirot's eyes swept the room, pausing on a wastebasket where a torn betting slip lay, its edges crumpled. The slip, from a London bookmaker, showed a wager of 5,000, a desperate gamble, unpaid. "A man who bets what he cannot pay," Poirot murmured, "is a man on the edge." Hastings frowned, holding the slip. "Good Lord, Poirot, he's in deeper than we thought. Could he have killed Langston to erase the debt?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his mind weaving connections. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the locked door, the absence of struggle, these suggest a killer Langston trusted. Ashbourne, he is not such a man." The investigation continued, Poirot questioning the crew with his usual precision. A steward revealed a troubling detail. Ashbourne had been seen on the deck after his argument with Langston, his face flushed with anger, a cloak draped over his arm. "A cloak?" Poirot asked, his eyes sharpening. "Describe it." The steward hesitated. "Dark, heavy, with a silver clasp. He was near the lifeboats, monsieur, just before the scream." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his gray cells at work. The lifeboat, reported missing in a later chapter, was a potential red herring. But the cloak intrigued him, a detail too specific to dismiss. Back on the deck, Poirot examined the area near the lifeboats, his gloved fingers tracing the railing. A faint scratch marked the wood, as if something heavy had been dragged. "Hastings," he said. "The cloak, the scratch, they suggest movement, perhaps concealment, but of what?" He paused, his gaze drifting to the canal, where the shadow from the previous chapter had vanished. The memory of that figure, cloaked in darkness, gnawed at him. A piece of the puzzle yet to fit. As the night deepened, Poirot returned to the salon where the passengers sat in uneasy silence. Elena Moretti, her handkerchief now a crumpled relic, avoided his gaze. Dr. Klaus Werner clutched his medical bag, his eyes darting to Ashbourne. Celeste Dubois, her auburn hair catching the light, sang softly to herself, her voice a fragile shield against the tension. Poirot's mind turned to the cigarette case, its VL monogram a tantalizing clue. Was it Langston's, as Elena claimed, or a gift from another, its style matching her handkerchief? And the perfume, Celeste's, yet tied to Elena's scarf, suggested a deliberate misdirection. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Victor Langston is a crime of precision, of intimacy. The killer knew him, trusted him, and left clues to mislead. But Hercule Poirot sees through such deceptions. His eyes lingered on Ashbourne, whose hand strayed to his pocket as if guarding a secret. "We will speak again," Poirot said, dismissing them. As the passengers dispersed, a crewman approached, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I heard something before the scream. Lord Ashbourne and Langston arguing near the grand cabin. It was about money, and Langston said something about cutting you off for good." I couldn't hear more, but Ashbourne was furious. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing the detail. "Merci, signor. You have added a piece to the mosaic." The golden Serafina swayed gently, its chandeliers tinkling like distant bells. Poirot stood alone on the deck, his gaze fixed on the canal's dark waters. The argument, the betting slip, the pristine shoes. They painted a picture of a man desperate enough to kill. Yet the locked door and the scarf suggested a more personal betrayal. As he pondered, a soft splash broke the silence, a sound too deliberate to be a fish. Poirot leaned over the railing, his eyes piercing the darkness, and saw a ripple spreading across the canal, its source hidden. Chapter 4. The Doctor's Grudge. Hercule Poirot stood in the dining room, its long table set with silver and crystal that gleamed under a chandelier's soft glow. The room was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, its walls paneled in dark walnut, its windows framing the canal's inky depths. Poirot's small frame was immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache a perfect arc, but his gray eyes burned with the intensity of a man who saw truths others missed. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings fidgeted, his honest face etched with unease. "Poirot," he said, his voice low. "That splash we heard last night. It's troubling me. Something thrown into the canal, perhaps evidence. And Ashbourne's story doesn't add up, with those polished shoes and that betting slip." Poirot's head tilted, his gaze drifting to the window. "The splash, mon ami, is a note in the symphony of this crime, but we must not play it out of tune. Lord Ashbourne's debt is a motive, oui. But we turn now to another, Dr. Klaus Werner. A physician with a grudge is a dangerous man, for he knows the fragility of life." Hastings frowned, his brow creasing. "Werner? He's a doctor, not a killer, but that medical bag of his, it's always at his side." Poirot had summoned Dr. Werner to the dining room, away from the salon's stifling tension, where Elena Moretti's tears, Lord Ashbourne's defiance, and Madame Celeste Dubois' guarded smiles clouded the truth. The dining room offered clarity, its orderly elegance a canvas for Poirot's methodical mind. As they waited, Poirot's fingers tapped his cane, his thoughts weaving through the clues. The silk scarf with Celeste's perfume, the cigarette case monogrammed VL, the locked cabin door, and now the mysterious splash in the canal. Each was a thread, but the pattern remained elusive. Dr. Klaus Werner entered, his tall frame rigid, his pale face set in a mask of restraint. His blonde hair was slicked back, his blue eyes cold and unyielding like the North Sea in winter. He wore a dark suit, severe in its simplicity, and clutched his leather medical bag with a grip that betrayed unease. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his German accent clipped, "I presume you wish to question me about Langston's death." I was tending a crewman's injury when it happened. I am a healer, not a murderer. Poirot gestured to a chair, his manner courteous but piercing. Sit, Herr Doctor, if you please. Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth, and the truth, it is like a pulse. It can be felt even when hidden. Werner sat, his posture stiff, his bag resting on his lap like a shield. Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands, the way his eyes avoided the detective's gaze. You knew Monsieur Langston well, non? Poirot began, his voice soft but relentless. He funded your research, yet you resented him. Why? Werner's jaw tightened, his fingers tightening on the bag. Langston was my patron, he said, his voice low, controlled. He funded my work on infectious diseases, but he treated me like a servant. He controlled every aspect, my funding, my publications, my future. He demanded results, threatened to withdraw support if I failed. A man like that. He paused, his eyes flashing with suppressed anger. He made enemies easily. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his gray cells at work. And you, Herr Doctor, were you such an enemy? Werner's gaze hardened. I am a scientist, not a thug. I was with a crewman treating a sprained ankle when the scream was heard. Ask the man yourself. Poirot nodded, his eyes drifting to the medical bag. May I see inside, monsieur? A physician's tools, they tell a story. Werner hesitated, then opened the bag with deliberate slowness. Among the bandages and instruments, Poirot's keen eyes spotted a vial of sedative. Half empty, its label smudged. A powerful drug, Poirot murmured, capable of rendering a man unconscious, no? Enough to ensure no struggle before a scarf is tightened. Werner's face paled, his voice sharp. That is for medical use, monsieur. I treat pain, not inflict it. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. Yet the vial is half empty, Herr Doctor. Can you account for its use? Werner's hands clenched, his voice rising. I used it for the crewman's pain, nothing more. You accuse me without evidence. Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing but firm. Hercule Poirot accuses no one, yet, but the truth, it is a delicate thing, and we must handle it with care. Hastings, standing by the window, interjected, his voice earnest. Poirot, the man's a doctor. Surely he wouldn't misuse his skills. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A doctor, mon ami, knows how to kill cleanly, leaving no trace but the intended one. We must verify his alibi. They moved to question the crewman, a young Venetian named Marco, who confirmed Werner's story. He had been treated for a sprain in the crew quarters at the time of the scream. Yet Poirot noted Marco's nervous glance, the way his hands twisted his cap. The truth, Poirot murmured to Hastings, is not always what is said. Returning to the dining room, Poirot's mind turned to Langston's character, pieced together from whispers and observations. The industrialist had been a man of charisma and cruelty, his wealth a weapon to bend others to his will. Werner's grudge was clear. Langston's control had stifled his career, turned his ambition into a leash. But was it enough to kill? Poirot recalled the cigarette case, its VL monogram a puzzle. Was it Langston's, as Elena claimed, or a clue planted to mislead? And the scarf, scented with Celeste's perfume, yet tied to Elena. How did it reach Werner's hands, if at all? Poirot questioned the crew further, their stories painting a vivid picture of Langston's final hours. A steward recalled seeing Werner on the deck before dinner, his medical bag in hand, his face taut with anger after a meeting with Langston. He muttered something about freedom, the steward said, his voice low. I thought nothing of it then. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind seizing the word. Freedom, from Langston's control perhaps. As the investigation deepened, Poirot examined the grand cabin again, its locked door a persistent enigma. The absence of struggle suggested a sedative, and Werner's vial loomed large. Yet the scarf, the perfume, the cigarette case, they pointed to others. Poirot's gaze fell on a smudge of wax on the floor, not from the cabin's candles, a detail that tugged at his mind. "Hastings," he said. "The wax, the sedative, the splash in the canal. These are notes in a melody of deception. We must find the rhythm." Back in the dining room, Poirot confronted Werner again, his voice calm but piercing. "Herr Doctor, you spoke of freedom. What did you mean?" Werner's eyes widened, his composure cracking. "A figure of speech, nothing more. Langston's death does not free me. His estate controls my funding still." Poirot nodded, his mind filing the admission. "And the vial, monsieur? Where was it kept?" Werner hesitated. "In my cabin, locked. But anyone could have accessed it during the day." The passengers gathered in the salon, their faces a gallery of tension. Elena's handkerchief was a crumpled relic, her eyes avoiding Werner's. Ashbourne's hand strayed to his pocket, guarding his own secrets. Celeste's perfume filled the air, a reminder of the scarf's scent. Poirot addressed them, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the killer is among us, weaving a web of lies. But Hercule Poirot sees the threads, and they will lead to the truth." As the group dispersed, a passenger, a minor guest, a nervous widow, approached Poirot, her voice trembling. "Monsieur, I saw something that night. Dr. Werner near the grand cabin just before the scream. He was carrying his bag, looking furtive." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but before he could respond, a faint clatter echoed from the deck. A metallic sound, sharp and deliberate, as if something had been dropped into the canal. Chapter 5. The diva's secret Poirot stood in the lounge, a smaller but no less opulent space than the grand salon, its walls adorned with silk tapestries and its windows framing the canal's inky depths. The room was lit by a single chandelier, its crystals scattering light like stars across the polished floor. Poirot's small frame was immaculate, his black tie gleaming, his mustache a perfect crescent above his lips. His gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, missed nothing, not the faint tremor in the air, nor the heavy scent of perfume that lingered like a ghost. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings adjusted his cufflinks, his face a map of concern. "Poirot," he said, his voice hushed. "That clatter in the canal, it's another piece of evidence gone, isn't it? And Werner with that sedative vial, do you think he's our man?" Poirot's head tilted, his gaze drifting to the window. "Mon ami, the canal holds secrets, but so do the hearts aboard this boat. Dr. Werner's vial is troubling, but we must now turn to Madame Celeste Dubois. A woman scorned is a force of nature, and her perfume, it clings to the scarf that killed Langston." Hastings frowned, his brow creasing. "Celeste? She's a singer, not a killer, but that perfume, it's damning, isn't it?" Poirot had summoned Madame Dubois to the lounge, seeking a setting where her theatrical presence might betray her secrets. The lounge, with its intimate ambiance, was a stage for truths to emerge, unmasked by the grandeur of the salon. As they waited, Poirot's fingers tapped his cane, his mind sifting through the clues. The scarf, scented with Celeste's perfume. The cigarette case, its VL monogram a puzzle. The locked cabin door, and the wax smudge, alien to the cabin's candles. The clatter in the canal suggested evidence discarded, but by whom? Each clue was a thread, and Poirot's gray cells were the loom. Madame Celeste Dubois entered, her auburn hair aglow under the chandelier, her emerald gown shimmering like the canal at dusk. She was a vision of elegance, her movements fluid, her eyes dark with a melancholy that belied her radiant smile. Her perfume, floral and heavy, filled the room, a scent that matched the scarf's haunting trace. She carried a small purse, its clasp glinting, and her voice when she spoke was husky, a melody tempered by sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her French accent soft as velvet. You wish to speak of Victor's death, I presume. I am devastated, but I know nothing of it. Poirot gestured to a plush armchair, his manner courteous but unyielding. Madame, sit, if you please. Hercule Poirot seeks the truth, and the truth, it is like a song. It reveals itself in the notes between the silence. Celeste sat, her posture graceful but guarded, her purse resting on her lap. Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers, the way her eyes darted to the window as if the canal might hold answers she feared. You knew Monsieur Langston well, no? He began, his voice smooth but piercing. A man from your past, perhaps more than a friend. Celeste's lips curved in a brittle smile, her eyes glistening. Victor was my past, she said, her voice low, resonant. We were lovers years ago in Paris. He was charming, ambitious, but he broke my heart when he chose wealth over love. I moved on, built my career. I thought that chapter closed. Her words were measured, but Poirot's keen eyes caught the flicker of pain, the way her fingers tightened on her purse. And yet, madame, Poirot said, leaning forward, you were seen with him recently, whispering in the gardens. And the scarf, the one that killed him, carries your perfume. How do you explain this? Celeste's face paled, her smile faltering. The scarf was Elena's, she said quickly. I admired it at dinner, and she lent it to me. I wore it briefly, then returned it to the lounge before retiring. As for Victor, we spoke of old times, nothing more. Her voice wavered, a note of defensiveness creeping in. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind seizing the hesitation. You returned the scarf, madame, yet its scent is yours. And your alibi. Where were you when the scream was heard? Celeste's eyes flickered, her fingers brushing her purse. I was in my cabin rehearsing. I practice alone to perfect my arias. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the purse. May I see inside, madame? A small thing, perhaps, but every detail sings its own song. Celeste hesitated, then opened the purse with a reluctant snap. Among the silk gloves and lipstick, Poirot's eyes fell on a folded letter, its edge worn, its handwriting elegant. He did not touch it, but his gaze was a spotlight. A letter, madam? He asked softly. From whom? Celeste's breath caught, her hand trembling. From Victor, she admitted. Dated a week ago, he wrote of reconciliation, of love rekindled. I kept it, but it meant nothing. I am no fool to trust him again. Poirot's eyes gleamed, the letter a new thread in the web. Love, madame, is a motive as old as time. A heart betrayed can turn to vengeance. Celeste laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. I sing of tragedy, monsieur, not commit it. I had no reason to kill him. Yet her eyes betrayed her, a shadow of doubt crossing their depths. Hastings, standing by the window, interjected, his voice earnest. Poirot, she's a performer, not a murderer. But that letter, it's troubling, isn't it? Poirot's head tilted, his mind racing. The heart, mon ami, is a stage where love and hate play their parts. We must verify Madame's alibi. They questioned a steward who confirmed Celeste's absence from the salon after dinner but could not verify her rehearsal. She often sings alone, he said, but I heard no music that night. Returning to the lounge, Poirot's thoughts turned to Langston's character, pieced together from fragments. A man of charm and manipulation, he had wielded his wealth like a scepter, bending others to his will. Celeste's past with him suggested a wound unhealed, a motive rooted in betrayal. The letter, dated so recently, hinted at a renewed connection, perhaps a threat to Elena's inheritance, or a spark for jealousy. Poirot recalled the scarf, its perfume a damning clue, yet Celeste's claim of returning it raised questions. Had someone taken it to frame her? Or had she lied? Poirot examined the grand cabin again. his eyes drawn to the wax smudge on the floor, its texture foreign to the cabin's candles. It matched candles in Celeste's cabin, a detail that tugged at his mind. "Hastings," he said, "the wax, the perfume, the letter, they form a melody, but the key is missing." He paused, his gaze drifting to the canal where the clatter from the previous chapter lingered. A metallic object, perhaps a clue discarded. Back in the lounge, Poirot confronted Celeste again, his voice calm but relentless. "Madame, you spoke of Victor's letter. Did he promise you something? Wealth, love, a future?" Celeste's eyes flashed, her composure fraying. "He promised nothing, I believed," she said. "Victor was a liar, always. I kept the letter to remind myself of his betrayal." Poirot nodded, filing the admission. "And the scarf, madame. When exactly did you return it?" Celeste hesitated, her fingers tightening on her purse. "Before dinner in the lounge, I swear it." The passengers gathered in the salon, their faces taut with tension. Elena's handkerchief was a crumpled relic, her eyes avoiding Celeste's. Ashbourne's hand strayed to his pocket, guarding his own secrets. Werner clutched his medical bag, his gaze darting to the window. Poirot addressed them, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the killer weaves a tapestry of deception, but Hercule Poirot sees the threads. The truth will sing in time." As the group dispersed, a crewman approached, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I saw something that night. Madame Dubois on the deck near the grand cabin after dinner. She was holding something, perhaps the scarf, and looked distressed." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but before he could respond, a faint cry echoed from the canal. A human voice, sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the mist. Chapter 6. The locked door. Poirot stood within the grand cabin, the scene of Langston's death, his small frame dwarfed by the opulent surroundings. The cabin was a masterpiece of decadence, mahogany walls inlaid with gold filigree, a Persian rug soft as a whisper underfoot, and a crystal chandelier that cast fractured light across the room. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of Celeste Dubois' perfume, clinging to the ivory silk scarf that had ended Langston's life. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp as a blade, surveyed the space, his gloved fingers tracing the air above the body's former resting place. The locked door, the key still in its place, was a puzzle that gnawed at his mind. A lock that promised answers yet guarded its secrets. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the door, his honest face creased with unease. "Poirot," he said, his voice low. "That cry from the canal. It wasn't a gull, was it? Someone's out there watching, perhaps even involved. And this locked door, how could the killer get in and out without a trace?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his gray cells at work. "Mon ami, the locked door is the heart of this mystery. It suggests intimacy, trust. A killer who entered without force and left without detection. But the cry, oui, it is a new thread in our tapestry." Poirot knelt beside the rug, his eyes drawn to the smudge of wax noted earlier, its texture alien to the cabin's ornate candles. The wax was pale, almost translucent, with a faint scent of lavender, a detail that tugged at his memory. "This wax," he murmured, "it is not from here. It belongs to another place, another candle." He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The latched window, too small for escape, overlooked the canal. The desk, cluttered with papers but undisturbed. The cigarette case, monogrammed VL, still hidden beneath the table, unnoticed by all but Poirot. "The absence of struggle," he said, "suggests a sedative, perhaps Dr. Werner's. Yet the scarf, with Madame Dubois' perfume and Mademoiselle Moretti's sighting near the cabin, they weave a complex web." Hastings frowned, his hands clasped behind his back. "It's a devil of a puzzle, Poirot. The door was locked from the inside, the key untouched. Could the killer have slipped through the window? Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined the window, its latch secure but bearing a faint scratch, barely visible in the dim light. "Non, mon ami," he said, "the window is too small, but this scratch, it speaks of possibility. A tool, perhaps, or a clever device." He paused, his mind racing. "We must reconstruct the crime, Hastings." The killer entered, killed and left, locking the door behind. How? Poirot's investigation turned to the mechanics of the lock, a sturdy brass mechanism typical of the Golden Serafina's luxury. He tested the key, turning it with precision, noting its smooth action. "The lock is intact," he said, "yet the killer left no trace of entry. This suggests familiarity, not only with Langston but with the boat itself." He recalled the crewman's sighting of Celeste near the cabin, her distress, and the love letter in her purse, dated a week ago, hinting at a rekindled affair. Had she entered, trusted by Langston, and used the scarf? Or was the perfume a deliberate misdirection? The detective moved to the deck, where the mist clung to the railings like a lover's touch. The canal was a mirror of shadows, its surface unbroken save for the ripples from the earlier cry. Poirot questioned a deckhand, a wiry Venetian named Luca, who had been on watch. "Monsieur," Luca said, his accent thick, "I saw nothing after the scream, but earlier, Madame Dubois, she was near the cabin holding something soft like cloth. And Dr. Werner, he passed by with his bag, looking anxious." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the cry, Signor? From where did it come?" Luca pointed to the far bank, shrouded in mist. "There, monsieur, but I saw no one." Poirot returned to the cabin, his mind weaving threads. The wax smudge matching candles in Celeste's cabin suggested her presence, or a frame. The sedative vial in Werner's bag pointed to a method, but the locked door required a subtler touch. He examined the doorframe, his fingers tracing its edges, and discovered a hidden latch, cunningly concealed in the woodwork. "Hastings!" he exclaimed, his voice sharp. "Regardez, this latch. It allows the door to be locked from the outside, yet appear locked from within. A trick, mon ami. A clever trick." Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot, you mean the killer locked it after leaving? But who knew of this latch?" Poirot's mustache curved slightly. "Someone familiar with the boat's secrets. Perhaps a passenger, perhaps a crewman. We must learn who designed this cabin." He questioned the steward, who revealed the Golden Serafina's builder had installed such latches for privacy, known only to the crew and select guests. "Monsieur Langston knew," the steward said. "He insisted on the finest security." Poirot's mind raced, the latch a breakthrough, yet a complication. It widened the pool of suspects. Anyone with access to the cabin's secrets could have used it. He recalled Elena's sighting near the cabin, Ashbourne's argument with Langston, Werner's furtive presence, and now Celeste's proximity. The cigarette case, its monogram matching Elena's handkerchief, gnawed at him. Was it Langston's, or a clue planted to mislead? And the cry from the canal? Had someone seen the killer flee? Back in the lounge, Poirot gathered the passengers, their faces a gallery of tension. Elena Moretti clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting to Celeste. Lord Ashbourne's hand strayed to his pocket, guarding his own secrets. Dr. Werner's grip on his medical bag was white-knuckled. Celeste's perfume filled the air, a reminder of the scarf's scent. Poirot addressed them, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, the locked door is no longer a mystery but a clue. The killer knew its secret, entered without force, and left with cunning. Hercule Poirot will find them, for no lock can hide the truth." As the group dispersed, Poirot returned to the deck, his eyes scanning the canal. The mist had thickened, cloaking the far bank in secrecy. He recalled Langston's character, a man of charm and manipulation whose wealth had bound others to him like chains. Elena's inheritance, Ashbourne's debt, Werner's grudge, Celeste's broken heart. Each was a motive, yet the locked door suggested a killer Langston trusted implicitly. The wax smudge, the sedative, the letter, the latch. They formed a pattern, but the final piece eluded him. Poirot questioned the crew again, seeking details of the boat's design. A carpenter revealed that Langston himself had overseen the cabin's modifications, insisting on the hidden latch for private meetings. He entertained guests there, the carpenter said, often late at night. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Guests, signor? Who? The carpenter hesitated. Mademoiselle Moretti sometimes, and Madame Dubois once or twice. The revelation tightened the web. Both women had access, motive, and opportunity. As Poirot pondered, a faint glint caught his eye on the deck, a tiny shard of glass half hidden in a crack. He knelt, his gloved fingers retrieving it. "Hastings," he said, "this glass, it is not from the cabin. Perhaps from a vial or something broken in haste." His mind flashed to Werner's sedative vial, but the shard's shape suggested something else. A lens, perhaps, or a decorative trinket. He pocketed it, his gray cells humming. The night deepened, the golden Serafina swaying gently. Poirot stood alone, his gaze fixed on the canal. The cry, the latch, the glass shard. They were notes in a melody of deception, but the composer remained hidden. As he leaned over the railing, a shadow flickered on the far bank, a figure cloaked and fleeting, vanishing into the mist before he could call out. Chapter 7. The red herring Poirot stood on the deck, his small frame silhouetted against the mist, his tailored suit pristine despite the hour. His mustache, a perfect crescent, framed a face alight with the intensity of his gray cells at work. The deck was slick with dew, its mahogany planks gleaming under the soft glow of lanterns. Captain Arthur Hastings paced beside him, his honest features creased with frustration. "Poirot," he said, his voice a hushed murmur. "That shadow in the mist, it's unnerving. A witness, perhaps, or the killer themselves. And the locked door's latch, it proves the murderer was cunning, doesn't it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his gaze fixed on the canal's dark surface. "Mon ami, the shadow is a whisper of truth, but we must not chase ghosts. The latch reveals a killer with knowledge. But today we confront a new distraction, a red herring designed to lead us astray." Hastings frowned, his hands clasped behind his back. "A red herring? You mean the clues are false?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind's relentless churn. "Not false, Hastings, but misdirected. The killer weaves a tapestry of deception, and we must cut through its threads." The morning had brought a startling report from a crewman. A lifeboat was missing from the Golden Serafina's starboard side, its ropes cut cleanly, suggesting the killer had fled into the Venetian night. The news had rippled through the passengers, their whispers filling the grand salon with a buzz of speculation. Poirot, however, was skeptical, his gray cells rejecting the simplicity of an escape. "A lifeboat, mon ami," he said to Hastings, "is a dramatic gesture, too convenient for a murderer so precise. We must investigate this escape with care." Poirot summoned the crewman, a burly Venetian named Gino, to the deck. Gino's face was weathered, his eyes darting nervously as he twisted his cap. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his accent thick, "I checked the lifeboats at midnight, as always. All were secure, but this morning one is gone. Cut free, the ropes frayed but neat." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his fingers tracing the railing where the lifeboat had been moored. "Neat, you say? A clean cut, not a tear." Gino nodded. "Si, monsieur, like with a knife." Poirot's gaze swept the deck, noting a faint scuff mark near the railing, a mark too deliberate to be accidental. "Regardez, Hastings," Poirot said, pointing to the mark. "This is no hasty escape." The killer wishes us to believe they have fled, but I suspect they remain aboard, hiding among us. Hastings' eyes widened. You think it's a trick? But why? Poirot's mustache curved slightly. To divert us, mon ami. To make us chase a phantom while the truth lies close. The investigation shifted to the grand salon where the passengers had gathered, their faces a gallery of unease. Elena Moretti sat with her handkerchief, its EM monogram a silent echo of the cigarette case's VL. Lord Reginald Ashbourne's hand strayed to his pocket, his hawkish features taut. Dr. Klaus Werner clutched his medical bag, his pale eyes avoiding Poirot's gaze. Madame Celeste Dubois, her auburn hair catching the chandelier's light, sipped a glass of wine, her smile brittle. The air was thick with tension, the scent of Celeste's perfume a haunting reminder of the murder weapon. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, a lifeboat is missing, suggesting the killer has fled. But Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. The truth is here among us in the clues we have gathered. The scarf, the sedative, the letter, the latch. We must look closer. His eyes lingered on each suspect, noting their reactions. Elena's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. Ashbourne's jaw clenched. Werner's grip on his bag tightened, and Celeste's smile faltered. A steward approached, his face pale. Monsieur Poirot, I heard a rumor among the crew Langston planned to disinherit Mademoiselle Moretti, to favor Madame Dubois in his will. I overheard him speaking of it days ago in the lounge. Elena's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. That's a lie, she cried, her Italian accent sharp. Victor loved me. He would never. Celeste's wine glass trembled, her face paling. Poirot's eyes gleamed, the rumor a spark in his mind. Gossip, mademoiselle, he said to Elena, can hold a kernel of truth. We must verify this. Poirot questioned the steward further, learning that Langston had met with a lawyer in Venice before the voyage, discussing changes to his will. The steward had overheard only fragments. A new beneficiary. A betrayal repaid. But it was enough to tighten the web of motives. Elena's inheritance, once secure, now seemed threatened, and Celeste's love letter suggested a motive for both women. Poirot recalled the wax smudge in the cabin matching Celeste's candles and the glass shard, perhaps from a broken vial or trinket. The hidden latch known to Langston and select guests pointed to someone intimate with the boat's secrets. Returning to the deck, Poirot examined the lifeboat's mooring point, his gloved fingers tracing the cut ropes. The frayed edges were too precise, the scuff mark too deliberate. This is no escape, he murmured to Hastings. The lifeboat is a ruse meant to distract. The killer is still among us, watching. Hastings frowned, his voice low. But who would stage such a thing? And that cry last night, it's connected, isn't it? Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the canal where the mist still lingered, hiding the shadow he had seen. Poirot questioned the crew again, seeking details of the lifeboat's use. A deckhand revealed a startling clue. A dark cloak, heavy with a silver clasp, had been seen near the lifeboats before the scream, draped over a figure's arm. It looked like Lord Ashbourne's cloak, the deckhand said, but I couldn't be sure in the dark. Poirot's eyes narrowed, recalling Ashbourne's pristine shoes, a contradiction to his claim of staying indoors. The cloak, like the lifeboat, felt like a planted clue, a red herring to mislead. Back in the salon, Poirot confronted Ashbourne, his voice soft but piercing. Monsieur, a cloak like yours was seen near the lifeboats. You claim to be in your cabin, yet the evidence suggests otherwise. Ashbourne's face paled, his hand straying to his pocket. Nonsense, he said, his drawl sharp. I was nowhere near the lifeboats. Someone must have taken my cloak. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind filing the denial. We shall see, monsieur. The truth does not hide for long. Poirot's thoughts turned to Langston's character, a man whose charm masked a ruthless ambition. His wealth had chained others to him, Elena through inheritance, Ashbourne through debt, Werner through control, Celeste through love. The rumor of disinheritance added a new layer, pitting Elena against Celeste in a battle of motives. The cigarette case, its monogram matching Elena's handkerchief, suggested a connection yet to be unraveled. The sedative vial, the wax smudge, the glass shard, the latch, each was a piece, but the puzzle was incomplete. As the passengers retired, Poirot returned to the deck, his eyes scanning the canal. The mist had lifted slightly, revealing the far bank where the shadow had vanished. He recalled the cry, the clatter, the splash, each a sign of a killer covering their tracks. "Hastings," he said, his voice low. "The lifeboat is a distraction, but it reveals the killer's cunning. They wish us to look outward while the truth lies within." As he spoke, a crewman ran to him, breathless. "Monsieur Poirot, the lifeboat, it's been found, tethered in a nearby canal, empty, untouched." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing the revelation. The lifeboat, never used, was a deliberate ploy, confirming his suspicion of a red herring. But before he could respond, a faint glint caught his eye in the water. A metallic object, half submerged, shimmering in the lantern's light. Chapter 8. The cigarette case Poirot stood in the grand salon, its mahogany panels and crystal chandeliers aglow with the soft light of morning. His small frame was immaculate in a tailored suit, his mustache a perfect crescent, his gray eyes sharp as a blade. The salon was a stage of opulence, its velvet drapes framing windows that revealed the canal's quiet ripples. Captain Arthur Hastings stood beside him, his honest face creased with worry. "Poirot," he said, his voice low, "that glint in the canal. It's another clue lost, isn't it? And the lifeboat tethered nearby, a deliberate trick. But the cigarette case you found in the cabin, it's the key, isn't it?" Poirot's head tilted, his gaze drifting to the window. "Mon ami, the glint is a whisper of truth, but the cigarette case, it is a shout. Its monogram, VL, suggests Victor Langston, yet its style matches Mademoiselle Moretti's handkerchief. This is no coincidence, it is a clue, perhaps the heart of our mystery." He retrieved the cigarette case from his pocket, its silver surface gleaming under the chandelier's light. "We must unravel its story, Hastings, for it will lead us to the killer." The cigarette case, found beneath a table in Langston's cabin, was a delicate object, its surface engraved with elegant script. Poirot had kept it hidden, sensing its importance, and now he held it like a talisman. "Observe," he said to Hastings, "the monogram's style, curved, ornate, identical to the EM on Mademoiselle Moretti's handkerchief. This is not Langston's, I suspect, but a gift or a deception." Hastings frowned, his brow creasing. "Not Langston's? Then whose? And why was it in his cabin?" Poirot summoned the passengers to the salon, their faces a gallery of tension. Elena Moretti sat with her handkerchief, its monogram a silent echo of the case. Lord Reginald Ashbourne's hawkish features were taut, his hand straying to his pocket. Dr. Klaus Werner clutched his medical bag, his pale eyes guarded. Madame Celeste Dubois, her auburn hair catching the light, sipped a coffee, her smile brittle. Poirot held up the cigarette case, its silver glinting like a beacon. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "this was found in Monsieur Langston's cabin. Its monogram, VL, suggests it is his, yet I believe otherwise. Who can tell me its story?" Elena's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. "It was Victor's," she said quickly, her Italian accent sharp. "I gave it to him in Florence, a token of our engagement. He cherished it." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the flicker of unease in her gaze, the way her hands twisted the silk. He turned to Ashbourne. Monsieur, you knew Langston well. Did he carry such a case? Ashbourne's jaw tightened. His drawl clipped. He flaunted it to mock my debts. Said it was a gift from his fiancée. I thought nothing of it. Poirot's gaze shifted to Werner. Herr Doctor, you saw Langston often. This case, was it his? Werner's eyes darted to the case, his voice curt. I never noticed it. Langston smoked rarely in my presence. Finally, Poirot turned to Celeste, her perfume a haunting reminder of the scarf. Madame, you were close to Langston once. Did he own such an object? Celeste's smile faltered, her eyes glistening. I don't recall, monsieur. Victor had many trinkets. Poirot's moustache twitched, his gray cells humming. One of you lies, he said softly, for this case is not what it seems. It holds a secret, and Hercule Poirot will uncover it. He opened the case with a delicate click, revealing a hidden compartment. A tiny space, empty save for a folded note. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the single letter scrawled in elegant ink. E. Hastings gasped, his voice low. Good Lord, Poirot, E for Elena? Is this proof? Poirot's eyes gleamed, but he raised a hand. Proof, mon ami, or another thread of deception? We must proceed with care. He questioned the passengers further, probing their reactions. Elena's face paled at the note, her voice trembling. That's not mine, she insisted. Anyone could have written it. Ashbourne's eyes narrowed, his hand straying to his pocket again. Werner's grip on his bag tightened, his silence heavy. Celeste's fingers brushed her purse where the love letter lay hidden. Poirot returned to the deck, the cigarette case in his pocket, his mind weaving connections. The E could point to Elena, but the case's style suggested a deeper link, perhaps a gift from her, not to Langston but to another misplaced in the crime. The scarf with Celeste's perfume, the sedative vial, the wax smudge, the hidden latch, the glass shard, the lifeboat ruse, all pointed to a killer who thrived on misdirection. The glint in the canal, possibly a discarded clue, tugged at his thoughts. Was it connected to the glass shard or something new? He questioned a crewman, a young Venetian named Paolo, who had been near the cabin before the scream. Monsieur, Paolo said, his voice low, I saw Mademoiselle Moretti near the cabin holding something shiny, perhaps that case. She looked nervous, then hurried away. Poirot's eyes narrowed, the sighting reinforcing Elena's proximity to the crime scene. Yet the note's E could be a plant, a deliberate misdirection to frame her. He recalled the rumor of Langston's disinheritance, pitting Elena against Celeste, and the love letter in Celeste's purse, suggesting a rekindled affair. Back in the salon, Poirot confronted Elena, his voice gentle but relentless. Mademoiselle, the cigarette case. Its monogram matches your handkerchief. And this note, with an E, it points to you. Why was it in Langston's cabin? Elena's eyes flashed, her composure fraying. I told you it was his. I gave it to him. The note, I know nothing of it. Her voice cracked, a raw edge of fear surfacing. Poirot noted the desperation, the way her fingers crumpled the handkerchief. He turned to the other suspects, probing their knowledge. Ashbourne admitted seeing the case in Langston's hand during their argument, but claimed ignorance of its origins. Werner denied noticing it, his eyes avoiding the case. Celeste's gaze lingered on it, her voice soft. It's beautiful, she said, but I never saw Victor with it. Poirot's mind raced. The case was a pivot tying the suspects together, yet its true owner remained elusive. Poirot examined the cabin again, his eyes drawn to the wax smudge, the hidden latch, the glass shard. The latch suggested a killer with intimate knowledge, possibly a crewman or a passenger like Langston's confidants. The shard, possibly from a broken trinket, hinted at haste, A struggle, perhaps, despite the absence of marks on Langston's body. The sedative vial in Werner's bag loomed large, a means to ensure no resistance. Poirot's thoughts turned to Langston's character, a man of charm and cruelty whose wealth had chained others to him. Elena's inheritance, Ashbourne's debt, Werner's grudge, Celeste's broken heart. As the morning brightened, Poirot returned to the deck, his gaze fixed on the canal where the glint had been seen. He summoned a deckhand to search the water, but the mist had thickened again, obscuring the surface. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "the cigarette case is a beacon, but the glint in the canal, it is a shadow we must chase. The killer is clever, planting clues to mislead, but Hercule Poirot sees through such games." The passengers gathered again, their faces taut with unease. Poirot held up the case, its silver catching the light. "This," he said, "is not Langston's. It belongs to another, and its presence in the cabin is no accident. The killer left it, perhaps in haste, perhaps by design." Elena's eyes widened, Ashbourne's hand twitched, Werner's jaw tightened, Celeste's smile vanished. The air was electric, the truth tantalizingly close. As Poirot dismissed the group, a crewman approached, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I found something in the canal, a small knife, its handle engraved with an E. It was near where you saw the glint." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind seizing the new clue. A knife, monogrammed like the case, suggested a deeper connection to Elena, or another deception. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The salon was a theater of tension, its mahogany panels absorbing the sunlight that streamed through tall windows, its crystal chandelier tinkling faintly in the breeze. Velvet drapes framed views of the canal where Venice's beauty mocked the human drama within. Poirot stood at the head of the long table, his small frame erect, his tailored suit impeccable, his mustache a proud emblem of precision. Captain Arthur Hastings flanked him, his face alight with anticipation. The passengers assembled. Elena Moretti, pale and composed, her dark eyes shadowed. Lord Reginald Ashbourne, hawkish and defiant. Dr. Klaus Werner, rigid with his medical bag. Madame Celeste Dubois, her auburn hair radiant, yet her smile brittle. The air hummed with unspoken accusations, the scent of Celeste's perfume a lingering ghost. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant, commanding silence. "The murder of Victor Langston was a crime of passion, woven from jealousy, betrayal, and greed. The killer struck with intimacy. No struggle thanks to a sedative stolen from Herr Dr. Werner's vial. The scarf, lent by Mademoiselle Moretti but scented with Madame Dubois' perfume, was the weapon. The locked door, secured by a hidden latch known to few, concealed the exit. But the true key, the cigarette case, monogrammed not for Victor Langston but for another, unravels it all. Elena's fingers tightened on her handkerchief, its EM monogram gleaming. Ashbourne shifted, his eyes darting. Werner's jaw clenched, Celeste's wineglass trembled. Poirot held up the cigarette case, its silver catching the light. "This was found in the cabin, dropped in haste. Its vellum mimics Langston's initials, but the style matches Mademoiselle Moretti's possessions. And within, a note, a single E, Elena." Gasps rippled through the room. Hastings leaned forward, his voice a whisper. "Poirot, you mean?" Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on Elena. "Oui, mon ami. Elena Moretti, you killed Victor Langston. You learned of his betrayal, his plan to disinherit you for Madame Dubois, rekindled by that love letter in her purse. Jealousy blinded you. You stole Werner's sedative, slipped it into his wine during dinner. He trusted you, his fiancée, allowing entry to his cabin. You strangled him with your own scarf, locked the door with the hidden latch and fled, dropping the cigarette case, meant as a gift for you, not him. Elena's face drained of color, her composure shattering. "Absurd!" she cried, rising, her Italian accent laced with fury. "Victor loved me. I inherited everything." But her eyes betrayed her, flickering to Celeste, then to the knife Poirot now produced from his pocket, the canal's metallic glint, engraved with E. "This knife," Poirot continued, "yours discarded in panic after the deed, the wax smudge from your candle used to seal a false note, the lifeboat ruse, your cloak near the railings, red herrings to suggest escape." The room erupted. Ashbourne sneered. "She's guilty, I always knew." Werner muttered, "The sedative, stolen from my bag." Celeste's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling. "Elena, Victor spoke of leaving you, yes, but I refused him." Elena backed away, her breath ragged. "Lies, all lies. Victor promised me the world." Poirot's voice cut through, steady as Venice's foundations. "The gray cells do not lie, mademoiselle. Langston's papers examined this morning confirm the will's change. Your disinheritance, Madame Dubois named. Your sighting near the cabin, the deckhand's testimony, the perfume you borrowed to mislead, it all aligns." Hastings interjected, his voice urgent. "But the shadow in the mist, the cry, accomplices?" Poirot shook his head. "No, mon ami. Elena acted alone, her rage a solitary storm. The cry was a gondolier, startled by the knife's splash." Elena's eyes wild, she clutched the table. "He betrayed me. After all I gave, my youth, my name, I sedated him, watched him slump, then the scarf, he deserved it." Her confession hung raw and damning as the room froze. Poirot sighed, his eyes sad yet resolute. "The heart, it blinds us all." But as crewmen advanced to restrain her, Elena bolted, shoving past Ashbourne toward the deck door, a hidden knife glinting in her hand. Pulled from her sleeve, its blade aimed at Poirot. Chapter 10. The Resolution Poirot stood in the grand salon, his small frame erect, his tailored suit pristine despite the chaos. His mustache, a perfect crescent, framed a face alight with the triumph of his gray cells. The salon's mahogany panels absorbed the sunlight, its crystal chandelier casting prisms across the velvet drapes. Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend, had pursued Elena to the deck, his athletic frame tackling her before she could leap into the canal or turn her blade on Poirot. The other passengers, Lord Reginald Ashbourne, Dr. Klaus Werner, and Madame Celeste Dubois, stood frozen, their faces a gallery of shock, relief, and lingering guilt. The air was heavy with the scent of Celeste's perfume, a fading echo of the scarf that had ended Langston's life. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice calm but resonant. "You have acted with the courage of a lion. Mademoiselle Moretti's flight confirms her guilt, but Hercule Poirot will now lay bare the tapestry of this crime." Elena, restrained by crewmen, stood on the deck, her dark hair disheveled, her eyes wild with defiance. The knife, engraved with E, lay at her feet, its blade catching the sun like a warning. "You cannot prove it," she spat, her Italian accent sharp with venom. "Victor betrayed me, yes, but I am no murderer." Poirot raised a hand, his gaze piercing. "Mademoiselle, the heart may scream its pain, but the gray cells speak of truth. Let us recount the crime step by step for clarity." He turned to the passengers, his voice a beacon in the storm. "Victor Langston was a man of charm and cruelty, his wealth a chain that bound you all. Mademoiselle Moretti, his fiancée, stood to inherit his fortune, millions in factories and estates. But Langston, fickle in love, planned to disinherit her, favoring Madame Dubois, whose past with him was rekindled by a letter found in her purse." Celeste's eyes glistened, her voice soft. "I refused him, monsieur. I wanted no part of his promises." Poirot nodded, his eyes warm but unyielding. "Oui, madame, but Mademoiselle Moretti learned of his intent. Her jealousy, a fire in her heart, drove her to act." He held up the cigarette case, its VL monogram glinting. "This, a gift meant for you, Elena, not Langston, was dropped in haste. Its hidden note marked E, betrayed your hand." Elena's face crumpled, her defiance faltering. "He mocked me," she whispered, tears spilling. "He said Celeste was his true love, that I was nothing, a tool for his ambition. I gave him everything." Poirot's voice softened, but his logic was relentless. "You stole Herr Dr. Werner's sedative, slipping it into Langston's wine at dinner. He trusted you, allowed you into his cabin. You used your own scarf, scented with Madame Dubois' perfume to mislead and strangled him. The hidden latch, known to you from Langston's confidences, allowed you to lock the door from outside, creating a locked room mystery." Werner's jaw tightened, his voice clipped. "My sedative, stolen from my bag. I should have locked it better." Ashbourne's sneer softened, his debt to Langston now irrelevant. "The man was a scoundrel, but murder—" Poirot continued, his eyes on Elena. "The wax smudge from your candle sealed a false note to confuse us. The knife, engraved with your initial, was discarded in panic, its glint seen in the canal. The lifeboat, staged with a cut rope, was your red herring, suggesting escape." Hastings, panting from the chase, interjected, "But the shadow in the mist, Poirot, the cry? Were they nothing?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile emerging. "A gondolier, mon ami, startled by the knife's splash. The shadow perhaps a curious onlooker, but no accomplice." Elena acted alone, her rage a solitary flame. Elena's shoulders slumped, her voice a broken whisper. "He deserved it. He took my heart, my future. I watched him drink, saw him weak, and then—" The scarf. It was so quick. The crewmen tightened their grip, preparing to turn her over to the Venetian authorities. Poirot sighed, his eyes sad yet resolute. "The heart, mademoiselle, is a dangerous master. It blinds us to reason, to mercy." He turned to the passengers, his voice firm. "Mesdames et messieurs, the truth is revealed. Victor Langston's death was a crime of passion, but justice will prevail." As Elena was led away, her sobs echoing across the deck, Poirot adjusted his hat, his gaze drifting to the canal. The Golden Serafina seemed to exhale, its opulence restored but forever marked by tragedy. Hastings clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder. "Another puzzle solved, old chap. Your gray cells never fail." Poirot's smile was modest. "The gray cells, Hastings, they see what the heart cannot. But come, Venice awaits, perhaps a cafe, tisane to restore order." The passengers dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and shame. Ashbourne, his debt unresolved but his name cleared, retreated to his cabin. Werner, his medical bag now a symbol of vulnerability, muttered about his research. Celeste, her auburn hair catching the sun, sang softly to herself, a mournful aria that spoke of love lost. The canal glittered, its waters carrying away the echoes of Elena's confession. But Poirot's mind lingered on a final detail, the glass shard found in the cabin, its origin still unclear. He returned to the grand cabin, his eyes drawn to the rug where Langston had lain. The shard, tiny and curved, lay in his pocket, a puzzle unresolved. Was it from a broken trinket, a lens, or something else? He knelt, examining the desk, and found a faint scratch, a mark not noticed before, suggesting something dragged in haste. "Curious," he murmured, his gray cells stirring. "The case is closed, yet this shard whispers of another secret." Poirot questioned the steward, who recalled a small glass ornament in Langston's cabin, a gift from a business associate, perhaps broken in the struggle. "It was a crystal rose," the steward said, "kept on the desk." Poirot's eyes gleamed, the shard's curve matching such an object. Had Elena broken it in her haste, or was it another clue pointing to a hidden truth? He pocketed the thought, resolving to let Venice's authorities handle the rest. As the Golden Serafina prepared to dock, Poirot stood on the deck, his gaze fixed on the canal. The city's beauty was undimmed, its canals a mirror of eternity, but the human heart remained a labyrinth. "Hastings," he said, his voice soft. "The truth is a light, but shadows linger. We have solved the murder, but Venice, she holds other mysteries." Hastings frowned, his voice curious. "You mean the shard? Is there more to this?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami. Or perhaps it is merely a reminder. The gray cells must always be vigilant." The boat docked, the passengers disembarking under the watchful eyes of the Venetian police. Elena, handcuffed, was led away, her head bowed, her confession a weight she could not shed. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes scanning the horizon. As he stepped onto the quay, a faint ripple disturbed the canal, a small object, perhaps a pebble, breaking the surface. He paused, his gaze narrowing, but the water settled, its secret kept.